Welcome, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today for Turning Visual Experience at the Branch into Real ROI, a fireside chat co-hosted by BankSpaces and Adrenaline. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. Today's session is being recorded and will be shared following the webinar. We'll reserve time at the end for Q&A, but you're welcome to submit questions at any point using the Q&A feature. We'd love your participation. Anyone in the banking industry knows that the branch experience spurs growth. Even as transactions continue to move digital, more than 70% of banking leaders are still investing in branches, but the experience must evolve. Today's discussion focuses on how visual brand experience and the human connection influence people in moments that matter. We're happy to bring together two people who spend a lot of time thinking about the future of the branch. Gina Bleedorn, President and CEO of Adrenaline, is a recognized industry voice on brand experience, design, and transformation in financial services. And Chris Killian, a veteran journalist and conference producer at BankSpaces, brings a sharp, data-driven lens to how banking spaces are evolving. I'll hand this over to Chris to kick us off.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah. Gina, it's nice to see you.
You too. I'm happy to not be a veteran, actually, but you are. So congrats.
Thank you very much. Adrenaline I think is known for being a real institution of thought leadership and also research into the various aspects of retail banking that drive that kind of customer experience forward that is so important in terms of getting your clients and customers across that threshold to have the best experience that they possibly can. I want to start out by saying that Gina is going to be a featured keynote speaker at the next BankSpaces, which is going to be in Bonita Springs, April 19th to the 21st. She's speaking kind of mid-morning on Monday, the 20th, around the same topic that we're going to be dealing with this afternoon or morning, wherever you're viewing in from. So Gina, thanks so much for your time. As a supporter of BankSpaces, it means a lot to us to kind of collaborate with you on this webinar. And I think that we can just get into it if you're okay with it.
I am. And you didn't ask me to say this part, but I can't say enough about your conference, about BankSpaces. This will be the third year. It's just a phenomenal experience for myself, for clients. It's more of a invite only, more of a retreat style conference, but I've made such meaningful connections, as have others. I can't say enough about it. So Chris, you and or some other folks on your end seem to know what they're doing.
Thank you very much for saying that. And we will have a registration link toward the end of this conversation if any of you who are tuning in right now would be interested in participating at the retreat that Gina has just talked about. So thank you very much, Gina. So let's get into it. For starters, at a recent keynote that you gave, Adrenaline did some live polling at that event, and you guys found that around 72%, as Sarah just talked about in the introduction, of them would still invest in branches, even if there was zero transactions in them. It's a really interesting kind of point. That shows that bank leaders, they know their branches need to transform, but what does that transformation actually look like in your mind based on the research that you've done?
Yeah, well, great question. Thanks for starting there, because that kind of gets to the heart of it. What does transforming mean? What's interesting about that stat, the majority of people still invest even if there's no transactions, is leaders saying that the branch was never just about transactions. And we've got this realization that it's redefining its purpose from a place where you do things into a place where important things are happening. And in recent times, bank branches have gone from essential to optional to nearly pronounced dead during COVID to back stronger because we've realized that digital is for the day-to-day banking. Branches are where you win relationships. So with all that as kind of the new paradigm, what does it actually look like? Well, it means branches are getting smaller, they're getting smarter, and they're getting more precise based on purpose. So you don't need as much square footage on the most part, and that's probably the biggest shift. But when I say smarter and more precise purpose, this is about no longer servicing and transactions. It's about first impressions and it's about advisory. And so think spaces that are advisory led, that are appointment friendly, that are flexible enough to still support transactions, but also being able to pivot to a life changing question. And so thinking about accommodating first impressions instead of transactions is not the way the majority of branches today were built. So this transformation is in short, turning on its head the way branch banking has been planned for and done for the last 200 years.
Gotcha. Maybe just a couple quick follow-ups on that. One would be kind of like, what is the psychological imperative? Like getting into the client's mind. If transactions are going down and you can do your day-to-day banking on your phone or your laptop, what are the components, maybe one or two, perhaps even three, of the more psychologically driven motivations that a transformation leader needs to kind of attend to in order to create the kind of experience that you just kind of talked about?
Yeah, ooh, you got deep with that. I like it. So thinking about putting your mind in the mind of the consumer, what it matters now is that I can walk in somewhere and feel that this place is for me, that it's relational, and that it's somewhere where I can have very intimate conversations, arguably even more intimate conversations than healthcare. And so as you think about that, you need to make sure that the visual experience of your space is saying that immediately to the customer, even before your people say anything, because ultimately the branch's job is to support the bankers and not something that the bankers need to come from behind to overcome. Welcome, despite my very crappy atmosphere, but rather the environment needs to work for them and work with them. So the number one empathetic mindset thing to think about is this a place where I can get help immediately, effectively, and legitimately? And that's why banking is more important than, coffee. If someone messes my coffee order, I might have an annoying morning, but if someone messes up my banking, it might adversely affect my life. So moving towards banking as the truly underlying, fundamental, emotional, life-changing thing that it is, your environments need to say that and support that.
I love that you brought up the word empathy, because if people are intentionally crossing that threshold to get financial advice, it's most usually because they have a big decision to make. And a big decision, whether it's a loan or a mortgage or whatever, necessitates a very empathetic approach from the people who are going to be advising and counseling that person through that process. So thanks for bringing up that word. Let's move on to another question. In that same poll, 37% of those who were polled said that branches, quote, make life moments possible. Then this is a kind of a segue from what you were just talking about.
Yeah.
So can you please talk about the role of the brand in delivering on those high value moments, like say opening a first account, a mortgage, like I just talked about, applying for whatever, a big financial decision in their life, or receiving financial guidance in a more universal kind of way?
Yeah, and one way to think about it is that people don't choose banks like they choose, sneaker brands or donuts. They choose them almost like they choose partners. Because these life moments are emotional, and your brand is how you're showing up emotionally. So again, these things, opening a first account, buying a home, planning for the future, people need in these moments of honestly vulnerability even, they need to feel confident, they need to feel reassured that the environment and the people in it, we've done this before, we've got you. And so you want your brand in how it manifests in that environment, and that means everything from the colors to what it says on the wall to what's coming out of the banker's mouth, is making the customer feel that you are human, that you are intentional, and again, that you're in good hands. We've done this before. We can help you. And these life moments will get you or lose you customers for life, because as we know, bank switching behavior is so low, mostly because of the inertia of the hassle. When you do something in person, even one in-person visit can literally transfer someone into a lifetime customer because of how it's handled or not.
Gotcha. Just a quick follow-up on that. When it comes to kind of the theme of empathy, the theme of that kind of very intentional interaction with the human being who is a branch employee advising that person, what are the kinds of things that you as a retail banking leader want to absolutely 100% ensure is coming out of that bank employee's mouth? What are the kinds of people that you want to be hiring? And this now, it just turned into a 3-part follow-up, but feel free to be succinct if you can. How do you train those people efficiently and efficaciously in order to make good on that very important motivation of developing and sustaining those relationships as soon as they cross that threshold?
Yeah, wow. That actually is the crux of probably what keeps most banking leaders and retail leaders
Yeah,
up at
for sure.
night. It is finding the right people, having them activate in the right way, and having that be sustainable. And what I'll say, strategies that we've seen work are often clients that go outside of banking to hire hospitality, to hire other service related trained folks that they can learn banking, but the idea of the concierge service. So that's something to consider. Upskilling existing employees, yes, but that can be an uphill battle, and you need to be prepared to get rid of the ones that cannot go into the upskill. And then lean on your referrals, lean on your line of business experts. If you have the right referral programs, if you have the right training programs so that they know how to make that handoff in and of itself is probably the most valuable and expensive miss you can make. So
Okay.
make the referral handoffs. And then once they're in the referred banker's hands, if it's commercial, if it's wealth, or if it's with the retail banker themselves, keeping a pulse on the relationship, following up digitally, following up certainly in person, all of that. There's automated ways to do that, but think about service in a way you've not done before. And there are some great digital tools, banker in your pocket type things, that are also great supplemental things to try that allow you to have that correspondence via chat, via text on an ongoing basis.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's go to the next question for you. The top reason that leaders have said branches still matter was that they serve as, quote, kind of a community beacon, a community hub, right? How does visual branding, now we're getting more to like the nuts and bolts, the meat and potatoes of what you're actually putting into that physical location, could be signage, design, merchandising, zonal strategy, signal community connection before one of those single, very important conversations even happen with your clients or customers?
I think this is actually one of the biggest and most expensive things the industry is trying to solve right now, and that's how do I billboard? I need to billboard. I know I do, because the branch's most powerful role is as a beacon. And if it's not there, I'm not in the consideration set. And the more it's there, the more I have more perceived convenience, and the more that will drive willingness to do business and consideration. But as you think about that, there's really 3 levels of challenge or opportunity. The first is just to be seen. So that is maximizing your signage allowances. That is making sure your signage and the use of color is projecting as much as it can. It's making sure you have inside out visibility and glass, and you can see things to the inside when you can. that's being seen, that's hard, but that's becoming in and of itself almost a table stakes to then the next thing is to be relevant in how you're being seen. You're not a theme park. You're not trying to attract one and all. You're trying to attract whatever your demographic is that you're trying to attract. And so you have to look like a place that fits in the banking category and that looks like somewhere they'd want to visit. And the third level of challenge is, okay, let's say you're nailing that. I'm inside out projecting my lighting. I got digital signage going, everything, and I look beautiful and everyone wants to come in. But am I differentiated from the guy next door? And guess what? If you are green or red or blue in banking, you can't own those colors. Those are the most common colors. Like 90% of all banks are using one of those colors. So think about having something that you own that is a combination of colors or that's using texture. So like Wells doesn't own red, but they kind of own red and orange, them and McDonald's. And then Chase doesn't own blue, but they own blue plus the octagon plus blue halo lighting. And so think about when you're beaconing, how are you being seen with best practice approaches? How are you being relevant to the people you want to meet? And then how are you being different? And a great non-top 3 example of that, one of our clients, BOK, for instance, BOK Financial, Bank of Oklahoma, they're red and black, and they have an octagon logo, okay? But what they've done on exterior presence is create a brand texture using their octagon. They have relegated the use of red to a highlight only, pumped up black, and actually it's a deep charcoal, also leveraged white, so their color mix, and then they've brought in woods and red accent lighting. So now you start to have an ownable combination of visual elements. That's what billboarding really is. That's how you become a community beacon.
It's interesting because, TD obviously has their green, right? And when you see that shade of green, I think you know that that's TD. I think it's known as like TD Green, actually. I don't know if it's been officially branded or copyrighted in that way, but it just goes back to your point. Like when I see that shade, I think of TD. So that kind of like segues into our next question, which is when you walk into a well-branded branch, what are those visual cues that tell you the brand is showing up, that they're intentional, that they are grounded and rooted in that location, from the moment a customer comes through the door to where they interact with the staff that are going to help them through whatever it is that motivated them to come into that branch in the first place?
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned green. TD has done also a client of ours has done a beautiful job of owning green and being consistent and deliberate with their green. But Regions is green, Huntington's green, and umpteen others are green, and even similar shades of green. So when you're in a market where those banks are also present, and as we know with the M&A activity happening right now, new entrants are flooding into markets where they weren't otherwise before. So think about how are you showing up in a way that's absolutely unique to you beyond just your color. And so to answer your question, like what does a really great branded environment look like? And the best and easiest way to think about it is by zoning, and it's not new or unique to how Adrenaline does things. Many people employ zoning, but the way I would encourage you to think about it, at each zone, and there's really only 4 of them, there's the attract zone is how you look from outside, and I just spoke about how to do that, being seen, being relevant, being different. But then there's this engage zone. This is often a forgotten zone. It's basically your welcome and your entry and your first impression. And I said earlier, we are turning a space from a focus on volume to a focus on first impressions. So what is that first impression? And A well-branded environment is going to have an immediate intuitive sense of wayfinding where you are not intimidated, but you feel instantly comforted and you have an intuitive sense of where to go. It is very often going to have some local connection. And it is good to say, welcome to your whatever local branch. But if there's other things that go with that that really feel genuinely local, and so nailing genuine locality, that's something. And then having, of course, the human touch of greeting. I'm going to need that. That's all part of a good brand experience in that engage zone. And the only two other customer facing zones are consult and transact. And what's happening now is that transact is shrinking and consult is expanding. And so what you're going to want in a well-branded space is that there is a clear and efficient path to transacting, because now and for still a number of years to come, you're going to have to accommodate transactions and let it be smooth, frictionless, easy, and as quick as it can be. But then on consult, now we get into the real new heart of what the branch experience becomes. And I would encourage you to think about consult spaces as first a variety of levels of privacy, but have all at least three: semi-public, semi-private, and private. Because sometimes a client or a customer may not want to go right into private. They might just have a quick question and start in semi-public, but you can migrate them. If they want to really go into talk about something personal, they're going to want to go into private. So a well-branded space, good brand experience is going to have those three levels of privacy. And all of that still keeping in mind, not only does it need to feel right for the customer, it needs to feel unique to your brand so that it's different from the bank next door. And what is happening now is that everybody's leveling up, especially the M&A. Even if you're not doing M&A, it's accelerating the baseline of what an experience should be. So the baseline's going higher and consumers are going to expect more. Be mindful of that. You need to level up your experience.
Gotcha. I have two quick follow-ups to that. Okay. The first would be this pretty succinct question, and that would be, what would you tell retail banking leaders, design, transformation, whatever, that they absolutely need to ensure that the employees that are in their branches do within the first 30 seconds of a client or customer crossing that threshold? And that goes back to, you need to expeditiously interact, but in what ways does that need to happen? If you can lose them quickly, what do you need to do? And the second one would be, can you talk about what roles brand values and culture play in that brand experience? And I think that those two questions are kind of is like question 1A and 1B. So go ahead.
Yes, perfectly AB,
Yeah.
and I'll succinctly answer that together. But so basically, from the consumer's point of view, customer member, they need to understand where to go, what help looks like, and that this place is designed for people like me and not processes. The worst thing they can feel like or say to themselves, am I in the right place? And can someone here help me? So you need to do that at some level as table stakes, but then you need to do that in the way that's right for your values and your brand. So whatever branded anything, whatever you stand for, extra help, extra empathy, locality, all of those things probably should be present in all brands. Make sure that comes through in how they are experienced visually, verbally, the environment, and the banker. And keep in mind that in the best experiences, the environment and the banker are designed symbiotically so that each supports one another.
Gotcha. To me, it's like, you don't want to, you want to ensure confidence, not confusion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Great way to say it. That's even more succinct. Well done.
Thank you, Gina. So moving on, what you bring data into these conversations, obviously, and Adrenaline does a very good job, like I said at the start of this talk, about like doing in-house research, thought leadership around the issues that we've been talking about. Whether it's how people choose their primary bank, or how they actually utilize the branch that they choose intentionally to go into. So can you share an example or two of data that changed a client's approach to designing the branch experience or transforming the branch in order to accentuate the experience of their clients or customers?
Yeah, you can't have too much data, but also you can, because if you don't know what to do with the right data, then you get overwhelmed. And so a few different stories of different size banks to put into perspective the data that matters. So Community Bank, incredible bank. There are a couple dozen branches. They were based in Wisconsin, but used data to figure out they had the majority of customers outside of Wisconsin in a major emerging market in Fort Myers. So that's market data telling them where to go. Then they used additional data about best practice and formats. They thought, ooh, we'll trickle in with ITMs. And the data said that's not the way to achieve critical mass. You need to go in with a flagship supported by ITMs. Different use of data. And then consumer sentiment data of consumers in the area, a high contingent of consumers, particularly a little older, a little wealthier, they want to be able to be serviced at a drive up, but also be very high touch. So we created, quite literally, based on all that data, a massive drive-up oriented branch. It's a big portico share, which is basically like a big canopy where customers receive curbside service. That's data. It literally dictating what format, where I'm going, what format I'm going to be, and how I'm going to design a branch. Different kind of data. Let's go from a couple dozen branches to a couple thousand branches to PNC, another client. And we had Jeff Martinez. You had him open for BankSpaces, and he spoke right before me last year. So this is now using consumer feedback data and consumer data analysis to inform marketing and then visual experience in general. So consumer sentiment about marketing in their branches helped them realize they needed to streamline the number of messages. They needed to focus on digital signage as the primary vehicle because static is really getting lost. And they had to streamline even within the messages how messages were conveyed. And then further research showed that even after merchandising and marketing is done well, if the rest of the visual experience is not cohesive, consumer sentiment dives versus when it is, they say, oh, this feels right. This environment feels like a place for me, a place where I want to stay. And that has led to a more of a focus on visual experience for PNC. And then even a third one, completely different. This is in a conversion with Flagstar, and this would apply really to anyone doing conversions or renovations or upgrades. They were able to use opportunity data to tier based on spend. So not all branches get the equal treatment based on the opportunity gaps of fair share gains in the market. If I'm killing it on deposits, but there's no more room, I don't need a tier 3 super new version of my signage that's all halo lit and beautiful. Maybe I just need the basic version, things like that. So those are 3 examples of 3 very different clients in very different situations that are using data-led approaches to just be more intelligent with how branch design shows up.
Gotcha. Just a quick follow-up to that, in terms of the various demographics that are participating at the branch, and that would be what I guess we would consider to be a demographic that is traditionally branch centric, right? It could be boomers and above, so say older Americans who have a long history of, that their dad took them to the branch and gave them $5 and like, you open an account, and now you're a customer of this bank for, my grandpa was, my daddy was, and now you are too, or something like that. When dealing with a traditionally branch-centric demographic, how can those who are reimagining what the branch experience is going to be like attend to the needs of older people who may not be as technology savvy as the Gen Z folks who we know love going to branches as well? But these are multi-generationally committed people to a particular bank and they want to continue with that bank, but how do we accentuate their experience in order to make sure that when they go to the branch as well, that they're being attended to, even amid the new digital signage, et cetera, and everything you just talked about?
Well, first, Chris, Gen Z is the new boomer. A bit counterintuitively, Gen Z are actually looking to go into the branch now more than boomers are. But that doesn't exactly answer your question, and I'm going to answer it with a great recent stat from Brad Nolan at Wells Fargo. He was relatively outspoken in 2025. Watch out, Jamie Dimon. Brad's coming onto the scene, and he's been great about the Wells branches are the heart of their banking system. They announced mid-year that Wells is refurbishing every single branch in the country. So very significant effort, very significant dollars. But what they've said is that they have an increase, first of all, in Net Promoter Score based on the visual branch experience. So when they do these refurbishments, and these aren't even touching staff behavior, these are just making them look better, their Net Promoter Score literally goes up, but also digital migration increases. And the digital migration and adoption is primarily with what has been more of the legacy branch goers, which tend to be more of the older Gen X and boomers that are being converted. So in other words, to answer your question, with the right staff behavior, and it is not hard, that helps migrate customers, in-branch visits are actually an opportunity to migrate them out of the branch because you teach them how to do it. And even the oldest of customers are able, in most cases, to be taught how to do something on their phone or computer because it is so basic now. And so it is very doable. And think of that actually in branch visits are an opportunity to get them out of the branch and increase advocacy while you're at it.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, this is the last question I have for you. So can you walk us through kind of like a before and after? And unpacks kind of like the biggest visual and environmental changes that made the experience feel more modern, human, cohesive, integrated within kind of like the physical space that you've seen.
Yeah, there are so many, but I'm going to talk about an oldie but goodie story in that we did it a number of years ago, but have since we were able to replicate that in partnership with this bank over years. The bank is Vera Bank. They have about 40 branches. They're in East Texas and expanded into Austin. And what you're asking about specifically with before and after is actually the hardest thing to do versus a de novo experience because you're having to change existing behavior, often existing staff, definitely existing customers. So they're used to one experience and you have to migrate them to something else. So in the pilot renovation for this bank, and actually the CEO of this bank was at Chase, and he came back to his hometown in Longview, Texas, and said, you know, the first thing we need to do is get more efficient in our spaces, and we need to do that while also enhancing service, and they did. And so this was not a new concept. This was the introduction of pods and an open plan layout and taking down traditional teller lines and also modernizing and branding the space. So it's nothing that you haven't heard before, but the before and after that people experience, it is profound. And so that starts before you walk in the building. So it's you see messaging at the drive up, different surrounds at the ATM, you see messaging on the windows. But when you walk in, instead of even things like lighting, paint, flooring, just really mild touches, upgrading the whole ambiance of the experience, instead of walking into something that's like a dated dungeon, you're walking into something that feels at least modern. But then it needs to be more than that. It can't just be clinical. And it has to feel like them. And they made it exude their colors, which are teal and orange. They've said, you know what? They may not be everyone's favorite colors, but we own them, and they do. And so they have this wonderful color palette that you walk in, you feel that. But then there is a complete open dialogue where a banker can come out from behind the teller line and greet you. There's a greeting podium that can be manned or unmanned. So it serves as a queue that gives customers an intuitive place of where to queue if they need to, but also a banker can stand there. And then there was an optional nook. I mentioned you want semi-public, semi-private, and private. So there was a semi-public, is that really the stand? Semi-private is a little nook, and they were able to take customers there for quick conversations, and then offices if they want to do actual transactions. And also it opened the drive up. The teller could flex to the drive up also, so they reduced their FTE by about 1.5 in every single branch across their network. And then they literally did this in now 40 branches and have a new model for go forward. And they had staff training to make sure the staff could migrate customers from A to B. And that may not be the most futuristic story, but that is a story of success in complete experience migration. And one of the anecdotal other results of that is that they were trying to recruit bankers, and the updated environment enabled them to recruit bankers more competitively, not just, and staff, not just customers. So that is one example of before and after moving to what you should be moving forward.
Gotcha. Please don't stick me in the data dungeon. It sounds like a bad place to be.
Yeah, but only when you're bad, yeah, you go next.
Exactly, only when you're bad. So a quick follow-up, and then we'll see if there are some questions that are in the queue for Gina. So can you just quickly tell us a little bit more about the role of the brand specifically in amplifying the experience or experiences that you just talked about?
Yeah, the brand, think about the brand as not a replacement for the banker, but the brand as a support of the banker. And what we do a lot, we do brand work, we do a lot of branch work and brand work. And what clients that have gone through brand refreshes or brand overhauls often say to us is that we went from our bankers and our marketing starting from behind to starting ahead. So when you have a differentiated brand platform to build on, everything amplifies it. It has a halo effect. And so think about, particularly in markets where you don't have presence and you're trying to move in there and make an impression, don't assume people know who you are. Also, don't assume they care. Think about what is the most relevant message that I have to say about why I'm here, why that matters, why you should choose doing business with me, or why you should keep doing business with me, and have that purpose imbued and infused into everything you say and do and how you show up, down to the material you use on your chairs. And that is not an easy thing to do, particularly because as you get bigger, it's harder to control all of those things. Some of our smaller clients actually have an advantage in agility, but as we progress forward and as just the world evolves, brand will only matter more and more. Purpose-led brands that stand for something. By the way, if you talk to Gen Z or God forbid, Gen A, they're coming up now too. All they care about is brands that mean something. What do you stand for? And this goes for employers as well as customers. So think about imbuing and embodying the brand in every little aspect. Everything matters. Get the big things right, but think about the small things too. And back to be seen, be relevant to who you want to reach, and then be different. And you've got to do all three.
Gotcha. Imbued and infused. I'm going to put that on a t-shirt. So I
maybe
don't have any, I don't have any further questions for you. I guess I'm going to see Sarah. Do we have any questions in the queue for Gina at the moment?
We do, actually. Why don't I share it with you, since you've asked? You gave examples, Gina, of brand experiences for banks. Can you share some best practices for credit unions, and are there different considerations there?
Oh, yeah. Good question. Credit unions, as you know, you play in the same field, but you've got a different challenge. Most credit unions, now it's different for some markets. Some markets are a little more overpenetrated with credit unions than others, or have some bigger credit unions. But there is a perception that you are not big or sophisticated enough. And that's just to all credit unions on the whole. So as opposed to banks, you need to think about creating that sense of we are as sophisticated as the banks, we are as big, but we have a different purpose mission that we can bring forth. So credit unions, what they end up doing and being is usually a little bolder, a little more modern, a little more agile, because they come from probably also a more retail consumer mindset, where a lot of our smaller bank clients have business customer contingencies that by nature make the brand a little more conservative in nature. But I would say, as a credit union, capitalize on what makes you a credit union, which is being very human, very purpose driven, very not for profit in spirit, but know that you are coming from behind on perceptions of scale and breadth and depth of services. And that needs to be conveyed really first and foremost, as well as sophistication of your digital. Because in reality, many credit unions are on par with banks, but there's still not a full understanding in the market. And then the other challenge with credit unions is about joining and membership. So making sure that you know I'm for you. And so the biggest problem with credit unions in naming and branding is names that are exclusionary. I'm so-and-so teachers credit union. I'm so-and-so this company name. So think about that, and is your name or brand a barrier? And if so, you need to think about changing it.
Thanks, Gina. I have another one, another question that just came in. Most banks, oh, for everyone, please submit your questions under Q&A, not the chat. So if you just see the Q&A button up at the top, you may submit right there. Here's the question for you, Gina. Most banks don't have the budget, like Bank of America and Wells. So how do you decide which branches get which treatment if you can't transform them all?
Great question.
Yes. B of A and Wells, your entire asset size is a rounding error for them. So there is a major scale disadvantage in some ways, but advantage in other ways. And I mentioned it earlier. As a smaller institution, you have agility that large institutions don't. So think about that. You can make change and activate it faster across your footprint than a large network can. But what I like to say most importantly is think about market by market. You want to win a market. You don't need to win the US. And so when you go down into a market, and then even into the micro market aspects of a market, which are the units that we study when we're advising clients on where to go and where to expand and where to optimize, that is where you want to win. And so you want to make sure that you have the right critical mass of network density and that you are winning against the competition there. And if you think about it market by market, it really levels the playing field. I am not discounting that Chase can't come in and just blanket your market in 3 months with 10 branches. I know that they can, but you have legitimacy because you were probably from that market, born in that market, and so you have local authenticity. But think about winning the market with density, with presence, with experience, and go market by market. That should be your threshold for priority. Don't do incremental change in this market and that market. Prioritize a market and then go to the next one.
Questions, Sarah?
Yeah, just silence.
Oh, sure. I'm
stunned
sorry,
everyone.
Chris, I wasn't sure if you could see it. I'm happy to read it as well. There is another one. So it mentions that some markets are opportunity markets, some markets are just flat, but you have to be there. How do you identify that by market, and what data do you use?
Yeah, so we leverage Curanos actually is the data partner that we use, and Curanos uses multiple data sources from the FDIC and other places, but advances them algorithmically into a lot of really smart intelligence that then we use to help create implied strategy. And really the main things to think about are performance versus potential. So, and when you think about a 2x2 of performance versus potential, think about there are some markets you may be killing it and overperforming, but there is no room in that market for additional acquisition or cross sell. You do not want to overspend in those markets. There's other markets where you're high performing, high potential, always keep spending, because if you don't, others are going to come in and outspend you. So there's a defensive play, even if you're winning, if there's potential. But if there's potential and you're not winning, those are usually your priorities for making a change and some kind of action. That means you don't have enough density, you're in the wrong location, you're showing up the wrong way, your branch looks bad, whatever. That means there is room to gain. And then when you have low potential and low performance, those are considerations for either consolidations, downsizing, or maybe reducing number of footprint. That's really the main overlay. And then there's a sub overlay of what is your density. So on critical mass, when you reach about 6% of critical mass in any given micro market or market, your chance of your branch share, your market share outperforming your branch share doubles. So you want to reach that critical mass. And then also competitiveness. How competitive is your market? And so all of those things factor into essentially implied strategies about what do I fix, where do I grow, what do I downside, what do I defend? And that's the premise of how we advise on how to both prioritize what format to come in and what order to do it and where.
Thanks, Gina. Shifting gears, we have a question pertaining to branch messaging and branch marketing. Is there a best practice around how many messages are ideal for your digital signage strategy?
Oh, yeah. So this is one that I would say there's a big dichotomy between big banks and community banks and credit unions. Large banks generally have an issue that they have too many messages, and that's because of the structure from which they evolved. They've got line of business fighting for space in the branch, and so they end up putting every line of business and having too many messages that probably feel not changed enough. On the other hand, you have community banks and credit unions on the small side that maybe don't have enough internal bandwidth and effort and attention to have regular cadenced branch marketing or sophisticated enough line of business to have that demand. So you kind of have on one side, we see they're not doing nearly enough or refreshing it enough or have even a strategy of line of business. And on the big side, they have way too many messages. And so a great best practice to think about is in any given quarter, you should not have more than 3 to 5 promotional messages. And that for some large banks can be very upsetting because that's much less than many have. Now, keep in mind, you also can have evergreen, always on messages. You can have some channel migration messages and brand messages. And so the right digital content mix is actually balancing the right pie of messaging. And you may need to turn up your brand dial or turn down your brand dial. But when it comes to true promotions, your promotions is the selling stuff. And if you're trying to sell too much stuff, you won't sell anything. So think about what is most important, quarterly cadence it out so it's rotating, so you get all your messages in, but you don't bombard the customer with them all at once. And keep in mind segmentation for branches too, where you can prioritize wealth, prioritize small business, prioritize commercial in branches where that opportunity is outsized. And that ultimately is turning your branch channel is a marketing channel. So treat it as such with measured discipline in what you're saying and how you're saying it, and enough attention to make sure you're maximizing it to the best you can for cross-sell and loyalty.
Thanks so much, Gina. We have a question for Chris that just came in. Chris, you report on innovations in banking, and the event obviously covers a lot of innovations in banking. Can you tell us what you're seeing in the industry and what people should be thinking about from an innovation lens?
Yeah, I think that it deals with, at least in the people I've been speaking to over the years, and specifically say in the past like 4 to 6 months, while constructing and engineering the event, it all boils down to like customer experience. I think that the one common theme that I've heard from retail banking leaders is, technology is sexy and cool, uh, and it absolutely needs to be integrated into the physical branch location. Uh, Artisan created accents throughout are important as well for the various reasons that Gina and I have been talking about in this fireside chat. But at the end of the day, it does really come down to, if I am making a conscious, intentional decision to go into a branch for whatever reason, I want to ensure, and that's for a human to human experience, I want to make sure that I'm being attended to in a way that respects the intentionality of me actually going there. And that to me is like, it attends to everything that we've been talking about, Gina. And that's the the uh, the recruiting and the hiring and training of great people, whether it's that semi-private, private, or whatever we were talking about, to ensure that that client uh, knows that they are safe in that spot. Everything else is super important, don't get me wrong, but they are accentuators to the overall human to human experience. And I think that is, I hope that I'm answering the question. That has been one of the main things that I have heard. And I think it makes complete sense to me, because as we've talked about, the digital, you can do almost all of your banking on your phone or your laptop. If you have a big decision to make, you want to feel like somebody is hearing you, and you want to talk to a human being that sees you not just as a client or a customer, but as a person uh, who is another human being.
Mm.
And that's the biggest thing I've heard so far. So
Wonderful insights. Thanks, Chris. We have one more question. I think we have time for one more. That's coming in. It says, this is shifting gears again. So back to what we were talking about regarding branches. Obviously not every market is created equal and requires differing spend and formats for branches and remote assets. Do you have a best practice format type, or best practices that you see in retail right now or in retail banking?
Yeah, there's a clarification I want to make about a lot of words are used interchangeably. We like to think of formats in and of themselves as just describing the real estate. So is it a fit out? Is it a ground up? Is it a remote canopy, et cetera? But the new version of, or the evolved version of hub and spoke formats is what we call archetypes. And archetypes is not necessarily something that looks a certain way, although once you design your prototype for that archetype, it probably does look a certain way. But an archetype is the programming of delivery. How is the retail branch experience being delivered? And so I would think about four main categories of archetypal delivery that are related to that performance and potential 2x2 I was virtually explaining. And so when you've got high performance and high potential, a flagship archetype, so, or whatever you call it, that everybody needs that. And that's going to be your biggest, your best, your flashiest, whatever version of that. And it's going to house multiple lines of business and be for acquisition and have technology and probably be in more expensive markets where there's more billboard traffic. Then you've got, though, so after that, what do? That's my hub. Now, when I get to spokes, think about for those high performance, low opportunity markets, think about whether you call it a legacy format or a community format or a neighborhood format, this is something that's not going to be focused on acquisition. It's going to be focused on servicing and also deepening share of wallet where there is potential. So you're going to want to house line of business, maybe house wealth, maybe house commercial or small business, and it's going to be a little less flashy. It could actually be more square footage, but the real estate's less expensive, because keep in mind, you don't want to overspend here. But then think about in that other part of the matrix where it's high potential, low performance. Think about new, agile, emerging formats. And there's all kinds of names for these branch of the future, new format, whatever it might be. These are places that are very much focused on acquisition, very much focused on going out into the community, not necessarily that much square footage, but they're in super high performing potential markets that are very visible. And so that's an emerging format designed to capture new business. And then you need essentially a downsized format, whatever you want to call it, something that's your efficiency version. How small can you be while still servicing, and how much money can you not spend? And so those are really the four categories of we would call them archetypes that you need to think about. It's beyond just hub and spoke. It's hub and spoke. And then even within those, they have very specific purpose programming based on your market and your target customer.
Thank you. With 4 minutes left, we actually just got another question, so I hope you don't mind. We're going to answer as many as we can to the top of the hour. This one asks, it appears advice and guidance is what most financial institutions are focusing on. In different markets with different densities, how does data play a part in designing branches and elevating them?
Okay, well, the underpinning of it is what I already explained, that what is your performance versus potential. So that's an important aspect. So based on that, that's going to tell you something about how big it is, or how much spend, or how expensive of real estate. But then what you need to look at is indicators of potential related to the target customer that you want to acquire. So for many of our clients right now, they're pursuing wealth, for instance. So you're going to want to look at wealth. What is data showing about wealth opportunity in the market? And what is data showing about competitiveness in the market? And how well are you performing or not today? Then also same with commercial. Now, the branch role is a little bit different for commercial, but the underlying fundamentals of consumer demand models still hold for commercial. So think about those demographics where that align with your demographics. And then all of that need to factor into how you show up. So what is the staff programming? If it is a market where you don't have a lot of performance or deposits to serve, you're going to want not that many banker, line of business, teller people, and you're going to want new business people. If you have wealth potential, you need to staff with wealth. If you have small business, you need to staff with small business. And so ultimately, you're going to want to focus on meeting the market, but aligning with what you're trying to attract.
Well said.
All right, I think we've done it. We've mastered the hour. And Chris, it's been I like hanging out with you in person more, but this has been pretty good.
Yeah, you're fun to hang out with in person as well. But thank you so much, Gina, for your time this afternoon. I think that we had a really fruitful conversation, and I also want to thank every person who has attended this fireside chat between BankSpaces and Adrenaline. I hope that all of you got or gleaned some value from being here. So thank you so much for taking the time out to attend this. Gina, thank you again for your time as well.
My pleasure. Looking forward to talking more about this topic at BankSpaces.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.